Good morning, Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I've been given the opportunity here to talk a little bit about championing diversity and inclusion and why it's important. So I'm going to start off with just a little bit of information about ISWAN, who we are, what we do, and then I'm going to why it's important to us as a subject, and then I'm going to talk about why it's important to the industry. So ISWAN then. We're a non-profit maritime welfare organisation based in the UK, India and the Philippines, and we have a very simple mission: to improve the lives of seafarers and their families. We do this broadly in two ways: through our direct services to seafarers, such as helplines, emergency funds and advice on health and well-being, but also by working with the wider industry through research, training and keeping members abreast of themes and trends in seafarer welfare. ISWAN is a membership organisation. Our members consist of ship owners and managers, P&I clubs, training institutions, welfare organisations. It's a network, if you will, of those who take seafarer welfare very seriously. The service for which we are perhaps best known is Seafarer Help. It's a 24/7, 365-day-a-year general purpose helpline, multilingual, dealing with everything from simple inquiries about welfare facilities to someone who's feeling suicidal and needs support. But we also provide commissioned helplines for ship owners and managers so that their crews have someone to turn to when they need support. And we currently take around 450 new calls every month. The data that we gather through the helplines helps us to understand what's going on out there for seafarers. They tell us about the things that they certainly wouldn't tell their employer. They might not tell their shipmates, and they may not even tell their family for fear of worrying them. This data tells us that life at sea is tough for seafarers, but really tough for anyone who isn't a stereotypical seafarer. Abuse, bullying, harassment, and poor mental health are regularly reported to our team, and disproportionately so for women seafarers. So ISWAN is doing its best to champion diversity and inclusion because it's important for seafarer welfare. So what do we mean by diversity and inclusion? So here's some very simple definitions, which on the face of it shouldn't be too controversial and would make sense in any environment where you want people to work together well as a team. We also need to understand that the two things go together. They're very closely linked. After all, there's no point opening the door and inviting people in if you're not going to make them welcome when they get inside. Now, many people's response to this would be simply to say it's the right thing to do. But that's not a convincing argument in a tough, commercially minded sector like maritime. So let's consider what the potential advantages of greater diversity and inclusion might bring. More breadth and depth of ideas and experience, new perspectives on old problems, fresh eyes, more talent to choose from. Thank you. These just disappeared all of a sudden. Improved retention. And surely these reasons alone make it worth taking seriously. And it's interesting to note that a number of major companies are now implementing diversity and inclusion policies and processes. So let me try and illustrate this then. So you go to your local fish shop and you ask for the fish that you've asked for years and years and years, and it's always been there. And the fishmonger says, sorry, it's not available this time. Global warming, overfishing, whatever it is. I can't get hold of it. So what do? He says, why don't you try this? This is a different fish. But you don't recognize it. It's not what you normally have. So do you walk away and try to find it somewhere else, knowing full well that actually everybody else who wants it is also going to be looking for it? Or do you ask questions about how do you cook it? What do you eat it with? And then buy it, try it, and find that it's actually just as good. It's human nature to stick with what we recognise, and the vast majority of recruiters in the maritime industry are looking for people that they recognise as seafarers. It's what they've always been used to. But what if that supply dries up? Early evidence indicates that the experiences of the pandemic have had a significant and lasting impact on the motivation of seafarers to remain in the industry. ISWAN has been collaborating with the World Maritime University on a research project to get a greater insight into the number of seafarers who are considering leaving the sector, and to better understand what steps could be taken to prevent this attrition. In this research, seafarers were asked about their original motivations for becoming a seafarer, their level of commitment to remaining in the industry, and the impact of COVID on their intention to remain in the industry. Seafarers said the main factors in their decision to leave include attention to their health and well-being, separation from family, lack of shore leave, impact of new technologies, leadership culture on board, opportunities for promotion and training, and the workload. This perhaps goes some way to explain the figures that we heard quoted earlier on the ICS BIMCO study, a forecast shortage of 90,000 STCW certified officers by 2026. If we look at the traditional reasons for people to go to sea, it was money, adventure, glamour even, the opportunity to explore the world, status, and for some, it was simply a way to escape whatever was behind them. But what does seafaring offer today? It's no longer as lucrative as it was relative to what other professions can offer. How much adventure is there when shore leave is so limited? What status or glamour is there in an industry that's invisible to the majority of people? Who's interested in a career for life these days? How attractive is seafaring to Gen Z, Generation Alpha, and whatever they choose to call whoever comes after that? So let's have a look at what young people are like. These are the people that are coming in to the job market, and they're very different from previous generations. They live their whole lives online. They have hundreds of friends that they've never met in person. They don't use traditional media channels. They prefer to listen to influencers because it's something that they can relate to. They're not motivated by money alone. They're also interested in the values of an employer. They want a job that fulfills them, respects their boundaries, gives them space and opportunities for growth, and ensures that they have a good work-life balance. They're not looking for a job for life. They're most likely to change their careers regularly. They expect to be treated with respect, and they're quite likely to challenge those who don't respect them. They're less afraid of talking about things like mental health, and they're less likely to have fixed views about gender, sexuality, religion, or nationality. And they may struggle with traditional prejudices. Of course, each person is unique, and some of this is generalization, but there are many studies available that support these points. There's nothing wrong with young people. They're just growing up in a different world and act, feel, and think differently. So we have to acknowledge that people have varying needs that have to be met if you want to recruit and retain people, and that's why diversity and inclusion are so important. So how do we create an inclusive culture? Well, seafaring is an inherently diverse community, but that doesn't mean that it's inclusive. Training is often presented as the solution, but this is limited in bringing about lasting cultural and behavioural change. Instead, we need to expand our understanding of safety in maritime to include psychological safety. And by that, I mean cultures in which people can truly be themselves at work, without fear of punishment or humiliation for asking questions, raising concerns, or making mistakes. And this is a long-term culture change that requires honesty and sustained commitment. There's a need for structural changes to make seafaring a safe, attractive option for underrepresented groups. There are still many obstacles for women to have successful and rewarding careers at sea. We need to address the cultures and behaviours that often make life on board additionally challenging for women, as well as vessel design so that there are facilities there to meet their needs. It's thought that around 25% of seafarers could be neurodivergent. Much more can be done to create environments that meet their needs and effectively cultivate their strengths, including making reasonable adjustments and addressing barriers to career progression, and making interview processes more equitable and inclusive. We need new approaches to family life, exploring new ways to achieve a viable family-work balance. And we need to make the most of the scope of technological advances to make maritime more inclusive and diverse, and to question long-standing assumptions of who can be a seafarer. So in conclusion then, the future of the industry relies on seafarers who are skilled, motivated and resilient, as it ever was. But the seafarers of the future will look different. Their expectations will be different. And we need new approaches to diversity and inclusion if we want to attract, recruit and retain them. Thank you very much.